All right, good evening, and thanks for joining tonight. We are here. I am not alone this time. Pastor Ford is out of town, pending whether he will be back by Tuesday. I know things are pretty crazy, or at least they were the last I checked, and so. But tonight we are still here. Tonight is going to be. I was telling Elliot before the podcast that this is going to be more like a vent sesh, where we just kind of have a conversation about realities, but I guess we can have liberty to make fun and poke a little bit if we have to.
I like this plan. Does my dad normally just slouch? Because I'm like at the top of the camera here.
I have no comment. We're live.
Is this how he sits like this?
Yeah, short answer.
There you go. Vent one.
Your dad sits at a computer, so he's perpetually hunched.
I love you, Dad.
Oh, yes.
You're watching this.
Yes.
I'm going to get in trouble for this.
He might actually be watching, and he's probably going to comment, and we're probably going to get ripped in front of everybody right now. But anyway, we're going to have
I'll watch the comments section for you.
I have it here as well, so you can
Perfect.
Anyway, okay, so tonight, episode 268. In light of the title, I was just running through a whole bunch of different. I like opening with illustrations and stories and stuff like that. But I remember reading this story. I think it was a book on leadership where I first read this story. But it's the story about Rosie Ruiz, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this story. And I think I may have used it either in a sermon or in the podcast before. But in 1980, the Boston Marathon had finished, and she was the first to cross the finish line, and she finished the time. Her full marathon was 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 56 seconds, which would have made her the fastest female to ever run the Boston Marathon. But there were a couple issues. Is one, she appeared to be unusually fresh, and so like she wasn't like panting, she wasn't like having a hard time standing up, she wasn't exhibiting all the typical signs of somebody who just finished a 2 hour and 31 minute marathon. And I mean, just to put things in perspective, like the average non-athletic marathon is like over 4 hours. So she did like, this is an extreme feat. This is like top athlete. The other thing is that no other runners remembered seeing her during the race. And then also, as they began to track back through the camera footage of the race, I mean, it's 1980, clearly they had cameras, and they had cameras watching every angle of the race that they could, and they couldn't find her. And so 8 days later, they declared that she had actually cheated. I don't think they actually found all the details on how. They think she might have like jumped in a car. Somebody said they might have seen her jump in a car and like speed around some other route or something like that. So she totally cheated, and she was stripped of the title. The next one in line, who was somebody 3 minutes behind her, was given the title, and so she lost. And the reason why, I mean, it's funny anyway, but it really is just an extreme example of, number one, what people are willing to do, the extremes people are willing to endure in order to be seen as something that they're not, or to get the attention that they're seeking. Like, right, attention seekers. She was literally trying to get the attention that a champion would have got. The crowd saw her. There's obviously some celebration happening at the finish line and stuff like that. And then the other side of it is how easy it is for us to be, as the viewer or the receiver of information, to be ripped of our attention. I mean, like literally, everybody's there. She won it. I mean, literally, like it's like watching a full football game, and then, or not watching a football game, but like actually seeing the end of the football game where somebody cheated, and you're celebrating because they were the team you're rooting for. And at the end of the day, it's like, yes, I'm so happy they won, and you want to go back and watch the highlights only to find out, oh, I actually cheated. And so it's like they robbed me of a moment of joy and celebration and attention. They literally stole my attention. And so on the other hand, the only ones who actually were able to make a legitimately informed call were the people who were in the race running it, right? So I poked these three questions at everybody listening. Who would you rather be? The joker, the one who's fooling everybody and tricking everybody and just for attention, or the fool, the one who's being duped and the one who believes that what's being said or what's being presented is actually factual? Or would you rather be the ones who knew the whole time, right? Seems like an easy call. But the truth is, we are a very trigger happy culture. We tend towards things that grab our attention, and we're willing to invest our time in them. We're willing to spend money on them. We're willing to follow them. We're willing to study them out and follow them from like on a personal level and root for them. And I'm talking about, at the end of the day, I'm talking about people that want their attention to be given away, right? And so everything I just said, I told Elliot in the very beginning, this is not like I'm not going to, this isn't like a Q&A type of podcast. This is more of just an open conversation. But the reason why things like this happen is because we fall victim to attention thieves all the time. We'll talk a little bit about virtue signaling. We'll talk about triggers, rage baiting, the trap of social media. And we've talked a lot about that before. But the problem with this way of living life and being easily duped and easily sucked into worldviews and ways of thinking is that it forms our opinions, it forms our moral compass, and it honestly distances us from genuine truth. And at the end of the day, Jesus made a statement and said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." He was talking about those who make a decision to follow him, be his disciples. He says, "You'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free." And so clearly there's a connection between being informed on truth and living a free life. And so anyway, I'm just going to stop there and pull your thoughts out. What are your thoughts here? Because I know that this automatically just, causes all kinds of thoughts. And
yeah, I was going to say, you've kind of lit a fire and just like see where the wind's going to blow.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's,
so I guess
it's fun. I do that with your dad a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And then he ends up saying, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway.
I wanted to err on the side of caution. I've already probably dug a hole for myself in the beginning of this podcast. No, I think depends on what the instance is, right? You mentioned about people, wanting to be, they're trigger happy or whatever. Sure. Like I think, people pay a lot of money to be duped, right? I don't know, if it's a magic show, I sure want to be duped. If I pay a lot of money to sit in the front row of a magic show, I want to sit there and go, how the heck did he do that? And make it a puzzle for myself of trying to figure out how he did this and think, if it's a magic show. If I'm the magician, I certainly don't want to be the one that's duped into believing that everyone thinks that they don't know how I did this. I would rather be the Joker, I think you called it. And then I think and so that obviously depends on the circumstances, but I think I think people, you mentioned about, people trying to get a rise out of people and people getting excited over things. I think of it saying the Bible talks about fools. They run swiftly to shed blood. As there's people, Peter kind of exemplified a little bit of this while he was still a disciple, when he was ready to rip out the sword and start cutting people's ears off, right? In the moment of adversity. It's like, come on, let's do this. Let's fight, right? Yeah. I can think about it like in my novice parts, when my leadership skills, my lack of leadership skills expose themselves. And it's like, let's just kick them out. Let's fire this person. Let's get rid of them. They can't make the cut, right? They don't have the right attitude. So things like that. Because it's the higher road, it's more difficult to want to calm emotions and think, how can we think reasonably about this? Let's look at the pros and cons of a thing. Let's see maybe where I'm wrong about a thing. Rather, it's much easier just to spew a bunch of, especially on the internet, where that nobody can attack you or punch you in the face. You just spew a bunch of opinion and garbage about a thing when somebody's virtue signaling or trying to get a rise out of people. You get a sense of satisfaction. People don't watch movies necessarily of waiting to, watch somebody patiently respond to something. They want to watch, flipping Captain America sock somebody in the face. They get a rise out of the hero that's conflicted, right? That starts to turn dark. The kind of, the raging monster within is something really kind of, and it's a weird word to describe it, but there's something sexy about that, something attractive about it. It's like, oh yeah, that's cool, man. Let's, I'm actually this raging monster ready to destroy and wring people's necks. And, people, it's interesting, like watching if you watch some R-rated movie, if here's the hero doing horrible things to people, and it's like, oh, it's justified because they killed his family. So yeah. And it's like, it's kind of it's a similar thing that's being triggered there. It's like, I feel justified. I'm going to go out there and perform justice on the world. It's the same things that crucified Jesus. It's the same things that, the same spirit, right, that wants to destroy things because it's fun. It's fun to destroy them, and maybe he said something that disagrees with what I believe or what I believe about myself, and so I don't want to hear that, so off with his head.
It's kind of crazy you say that about that's what crucified Jesus, because it's interesting. They did, like, the popular vote killed Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, the crowd was crying out, crucify him, crucify him.
Yeah.
All because they were stirred up by Pharisees.
Yeah.
The Bible actually specifically says that they stirred the crowd up against him. And so it's interesting because they're, Jesus, like, when you just follow the life of Jesus, he didn't do anything, I was going to say offensive, but he did definitely offend people. But he wasn't being egregious.
He wasn't doing it for
yeah,
views.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, he wasn't. And,
Yeah.
and he wasn't trying to get people's attention. He definitely wasn't an attention thief. He was simply speaking truth. And it's interesting because it almost feels like when you look at and you follow the narrative of the Gospels, it's almost like we human beings, we have a hard time with truth.
Yeah.
We really do struggle
Yeah.
with that idea. And the scripture, I actually told this to Elliot at the beginning, before the podcast started, is the scripture that was in my mind for this podcast was when Jesus himself says, "Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors," he's talking about all men, how their ancestors treated false prophets, which is, that's a very crazy thing if you think about it. These guys were claiming to be something they weren't. They're claiming, I'm a prophet and the words that I speak are from God, but they were lying. They were literally lying.
Yeah.
And they weren't speaking the truth. And Jesus says they got the popular vote.
Yeah.
And he says, so he's focusing this on the people. Woe to you if all men speak well of you. But he's also pointing out a very interesting dynamic in human nature is, one, we will go with the popular vote even if it's not true.
Right.
We will go with the popular opinion even if it's not true. And even if it's claiming to be something it's not.
Yeah.
We'll support it.
Yeah.
And so it's it's scary because we fall into this trap. Well, I'm curious, what do you think about our desire for attention? When I say just those words, what comes to mind?
That's really broad, so I'm not really sure what. I know you're purposely not going for something specific here, but I guess just like what, in what context? Like,
the context of what we're talking about. So like on the one hand, like I said, you have the fool, you have the ones who were there that were informed, but you also have the joker, the one who's trying to get the attention.
Yeah,
I think there's a little bit of that in all of us, right?
I think that's a neutral thing, right? Because if your desire to have attention is not an evil desire, right? Like, we desire to have attention when we go out in the street on Friday night and proclaim the gospel, right? So it's like, oh, you're a bunch of attention seekers. Well, yes, we do want your attention. In fact, the majority of the internet is attention seeking, trying to get views and trying to get attention, trying to get the people's interest.
Do you think those are the same thing?
No. Like what we do and what people do on the internet. Oh, I mean, the internet is very broad, so I mean, it's full of all kinds of different agendas. I can't speak for the entire internet.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. Let's just talk as if we'll just kind of generalize things, but obviously there's going to be exceptions to things we say from that perspective. Sure. But let's try to narrow it down to what are some key differences, because we don't go out seeking attention for ourselves.
Right.
There's a big difference.
We want people's interest from the standpoint of. Actually, I'll take that back. That's an incorrect statement. It's not that we want people's interest as much as we want people that are showing interest in the Spirit of God dealing with them. That there's an openness there to wanting to understand more, or thinking, or openness to more beyond this life, beyond sin, beyond. Someone who's starting to come to terms with the fact that there's consequences to sin, that there's a life after this one, that there must be something bigger or more to live for, right? And so really we're just hoping to capture their interest in that and be the voice of someone who can bring the answer to that, right? So Yes, sorry, I probably misrepresented that very poorly as far as like attention seeking, as much
No,
as
no,
just
but
like,
no, but that's it's true.
yeah,
It's not. You didn't say something that was false. We are trying to get people's attention, but I think the
right.
motivation is what's the difference, right?
No, you said it right as far as like we're not a teaching, seeking attention for
Right.
ourselves. You know, like, here, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's more like, yeah, we want people's attention so we can point it to Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
exactly.
You know, and the idea here is there should also be that while we have their attention, they should be able to find things that resemble Jesus in us.
Yeah.
So as people begin to dig and inquire more, that there's evidence of Jesus' presence in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
I actually put in my notes because you're talking about the attention, the desire for attention itself isn't necessarily wrong.
yeah,
It's natural, right?
right,
We do,
right.
and the truth is, who doesn't want all men to speak well of them? Who wants?
Yeah.
Who desires to be spoken ill of?
Yeah.
Right. There's still something. So it's almost like you have to find this like fine balance between, you know, the right motivations for attention,
Yeah.
and then
You know, I'll pose that to you as a question. Is more like, I don't mind admitting that it's like I do kind of struggle with that scripture for a little bit because, on the surface level, and I'll be the guinea pig in the room for this, is like on the surface level, it's like, okay, if men don't speak well of you, that's going to be a tough life. You know, what if my wife is constantly talking bad about me? That's not going to do me any favors. My kids are talking bad about me. If my boss is talking bad about me, if my pastor is talking bad about me, like, so I wonder, and I'm quite confident Jesus wasn't necessarily referring specifically to these things. He said, when men speak well of you, but I wonder, what does that mean then? What's the takeaway for Christianity, or what's the takeaway that people who aspire to follow Jesus, should they be, like you said, we don't want people to speak negatively of us. That shouldn't be the goal, but Jesus does say woe to us. So, okay, what's the thing then? What do we do then?
yeah, I think that's actually a really valid question. I would there are a couple scriptures that went through my mind, so I'm trying to like compile them into a solid answer. But I think that there are a lot of hard lessons I've personally learned from trying to like gain a competitive edge in things I'm doing, rather than just zoom back and go, what's the goal here? Like for, the whole idea of mission first. Jesus said, I only do those things which please the Father.
Yeah.
Right? And people hated him because of the way he spoke and the things he stood for and the things he preached, the way he lived his life. He was different.
Yeah.
He didn't try to get people's attention. He gained attention, but it wasn't what he was seeking. He constantly pointed towards the Father. He was constantly, to use Scott Lamb's verbiage, he says he's constantly deferring to the Father, and that's a very powerful dynamic, because in order to do that, you have to deny yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's what Jesus did, and people clearly hated him for that, because he didn't line up with what the icon of the day was. The Pharisee, the priest, these guys were robust in their presence. They were like, they were personality heavy. They wore clothes that drew attention. They prayed to get attention.
Yeah.
They gave to get attention. Everything they did was, look what I'm doing. They even prayed
To get
attention.
Yeah.
Like I am not like,
Yeah.
like a scripture your dad used. Was it your dad or you? One of you guys uses the Pharisee and was it Sunday school? The Pharisee and the tax collector praying.
Mm-hmm.
And so one guy is like, he sees very clearly he's not all that.
Yeah.
And he's praying that way.
Yeah.
But the other guy's presenting himself before God as if he deserves glory.
Yeah.
But Jesus, John made a statement that I think it kind of highlights the difference. Is those who live for the love of the world, they want to have this connection with the world, will they will be spoken well of, because you're going to do things that gain the favor of the world. But he says, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him.
Yeah.
And that's a really sobering statement. But he also says, for everything in the world, think about what he's saying here: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, all those things are self.
Yeah.
They're all self desires. I want this for me. I want that for me. I want them for me. And Jesus didn't live that way. And so to answer your question more directly is, I think that the motivation is, am I living life to defer to Jesus, or am I living life to bring attention to myself? And ultimately, Jesus said, my witness is true because the Father bears witness of me.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm not living for myself, yet he's exalting me.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because he was being elevated not by his own doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In
yeah.
a sense, it was like, and that really is the difference between living a genuine life for Jesus, is like, I'm not pushing to get number one.
Yeah.
I'm pushing to, what does God want? What's going to be pleasing to God? And I think that's a challenge, because I'm not saying that from the standpoint, I've learned this lesson and, I've got this down. It's wisdom from God.
Many years of wisdom.
Yes, exactly.
Experience.
But I can say that I have eaten a lot of humble pie.
Yeah.
Because of my own quest for self.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in. I don't mind saying, before and after the podcast, we've been doing this for over 260 episodes. I've been in this room, sitting across from my pastor, and been, getting ripped for that very thing, putting myself first, and thinking I have wisdom, and then hearing, well, no, actually, what you're saying right now is foolish.
Yeah.
But me thinking it's wisdom, and so it's like I'm saying things and I'm doing things to try and get attention. It's like, I'm just gonna start shutting up more often, and saying what matters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What matters? Truth matters.
So you find yourself in conversations where they're more like monologues than conversations.
Yeah, exactly. I'm cool with that, man. A fool, if he's silent, is not wise. I live by that sometimes.
It's funny.
Did that answer your question? I don't know. You kind of
no, I did. Yeah, I sort of
yeah.
purposely guinea pigged myself for that, but more because that's something to me that I think of like, yeah, I do. I was funny. I was on the phone with my wife about this today. It's just like, talking about, the things, the opportunities. We were talking a little bit about this before the podcast, of just like the opportunities that are presenting themselves to me. And it's just like, I really don't want to blow this, but there's also just a reality of the fact that there's going to be instances where, success or whatever, or maybe privilege or whatever is given to me that is probably eventually going to come to a point where this is going to detour me from the path I believe God has for my life, and so I think there's going to need to be decisions that I have to make that are like, well, even though these people speak well of me, or maybe they like what I'm doing, they're speaking well of me because of things they've taught me that I've embraced, that I've started to embrace their way of doing things and their approach and such, and I'm super grateful for that, and I've learned so much from them and being able to be a reflection of them, and so it's like, hey, you're on board with what we're doing, and you'll be an asset to this. The moment I start just thinking of myself and how I want to do things and what I think is a great idea and all my years of wisdom, executing that is probably going to be a problem. Now, I just sort of bring this back into some sort of sense of like eternal mindset, back to the context of attention seeking in general. I think that if it's, especially if one desires to follow after Christ, the problem is that the first thing it usually is, it's unfortunately modern Christianity really does, is it becomes all about, finally, God sees me. And when we look in the Bible, is that there were most of the time people, especially, instances where they were calling to Jesus. They wanted to know. Jesus made challenges, but it seemed like he had no problem with people falling off and not following him.
Yeah.
They had to commit themselves. So yes, Jesus did go to the disciples and say, hey, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. But we see him repeatedly, who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? Right. So he's at many, many points giving them the exit, right, of allowing people to step off. But now they have to decide for themselves, is this about you or is this about me? Another, when Peter gives the revelation, you're the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus didn't say, man, Peter, wow, you're really getting it, man. You really are smart. You're really like pulling some stuff out, man. Thank God that for the wisdom that you're conjuring up. He actually doesn't even credit his revelation with Peter. He says, flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, right?
In other words, you didn't figure this out on your own.
Yeah, it's like, thank God you finally embraced something else bigger than yourself, right? So like that's obviously a key to us, that the first, and I believe personally, and I do stress that I believe, is I haven't tested this out yet, or feel like I have this long enough in my life to say I can stand by this as a principle or claim it's a principle, but when you start salvation first with saying, you know what, I don't have all the pieces and I'm not right for this. I need other people's input, and I need to start disappearing and start embracing what the Bible has to say and what other leaders have to say instead, rather than going off of what you think is right and what you believe is the right way to go. That's the only way Christianity can work, because it can't be self-conjured. It can't be something we come up with. The Bible says our hearts are deceitfully wicked. Basically, everything that our bodies or our minds can produce is just simply self-gratifying. It cannot produce on its own anything worthwhile. It's only when the Spirit is inside of us that we can begin to produce something that's eternally valuable, rather than just a bunch of rhetoric and a bunch of attention seeking. And look at me, here's videos of me worshiping God, and selfie with my clothes hanging off in the mirror, John 3:16, blah, blah, all this stuff, right? It's like, sorry, I'm trying to stay on the attention seeking.
No, this is perfect.
But just like, I think like that's the only way. Listen, this isn't just a slash. If you do this, you post a picture of yourself and it's got John 3:16, and you're clearly not a Christian. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just simply saying, like, when this is the substance of who we are as followers of Christ, then I don't have anything against people who are not in the church, people who are not Christians, looking at that going, I have no interest in wanting to be a Christian if that's what Christianity is. Yeah. I don't need a crutch. I don't need, it's like, what's the difference between you and somebody that's really into fitness and, clean eating, no days off? It's the same thing. Like it's just self-rhetoric, it's just something, oh, good, I'm glad you found something that makes you happy. Good for you, instead of choosing something that actually costs you a lot and costs you your reputation, and costs you your attention. I just don't see any other way and for that to work. And interestingly enough, you and I can probably attest to this, that in every decision we've made to follow Christ has actually been our only chance at ever receiving any positive attention.
Yeah, I know. That's totally true. 100%.
It's not true. Like our lives are like, oh yeah, man, I'm a manager. Let me tell you. Let me write a book about being a manager.
Yeah. That's sad. I've actually thought about writing a book. Definitely not on leadership or management. And honestly, I've never even had content moments. I just like to write. I'd like to write, even if it was a fictional anyway. Well, it's some other conversation. I was actually, so you're talking about this whole thing, and I was thinking, because I'd actually put this note down, and I have like kind of a rough draft note, and then I make like a permanent draft for what I'm going to actually talk about in the podcast. And I had actually put down, but forgot about it until you just started talking about how virtue signaling and even rage baiting to some extent, and purposefully triggering people, and producing content that's specific to self. I actually was driving to work today, or driving to the podcast today, and in the rearview mirror I saw a phone up, and we're driving, like literally actively driving. This chick's driving a Tesla, and her phone, all I can see is her phone, and all I can see is her face kind of popping around the side.
No way. Someone
literally
had their phone out while they were driving?
She was driving, yeah. Big old huge pink phone.
You've never seen that before, huh? I feel like I see that every day.
I literally was like, I'm going to do a podcast about you right now. Like literally right now.
Got inspired.
But I was thinking about how like this really is just, it's like it's like the collaboration of our general insecurity. Like the expression of our general insecurity. Like
right.
we don't like, people really aren't confident in who they are. They're not confident in their own skin. For generally, I'm talking about general population. Not everybody's like that, obviously, but even in,
I would say that I actually would go go dangerously close to defending that, and I have a reason for that.
Defending
why people are like that,
okay.
Generally speaking, and I think there's a few reasons. Is one, I don't know, this is just, again, I feel silly head game. Here's my opinion, of this whole thing. But this is what you wanted to do, Jordan. You set me up for this. But, generally speaking, something I really admire about people that are usually like 45 and above is they just have this, generally speaking, my experience has been they have a bigger picture. It's also, they're older, they've got some wisdom, but they just seem to be, and the stories they tell are collaborative stories of, they had friends and they went out with their friends and did things together, and they worked a job and their coworkers and then put something together. There's not like this, it didn't seem like there was this like group of heroes, especially like the early days of our church, of our fellowship. This is something that stated is of what the churches did. Jesus wrote letters to the churches in Revelations, right, of bringing correction and such. Paul wrote letters to the Corinthian church and the Ephesian church, and yes, he had some direct letters to Timothy and such, but it doesn't seem like it's very individual. Whereas as our generation is much more self-focused, and it's like, it's easy to rat on that, like, oh, you're just a bunch of selfish bratty little kid. Okay, here's a few factors, right, that I see that these are the challenges of these kids grow up with. We thought kids watching television was like, oh my god, that's, you got to get them off the TV. They are infused with being bombarded, if they have access to social media, of constantly being bombarded with perfection. There's a guitar player called Ichikanito who's a very great guitar player and flawless, beautiful technique, who's now under fire because there's YouTubers that are debunking his playing because they're realizing, wait, he moved his hand this way, but this note's still ringing, but you can see he stopped it. So all it is what he's done is he's recorded a video of him playing something and then gone and perfected it. So he's basically recorded stuff to make the technique flawless, right? And the stuff he's playing is virtually impossible. Like it's nearly impossible. You can't get your fingers to do stuff like that, but he can. Now, you watch him live and he's still an amazing guitar player. But something that was noted is, unfortunately, that's the world we live in now. You have to be a perfect guitar player for anyone to really be interested in your views. Otherwise, it's, dude, you're trash. Your technique's garbage. You need to go practice more. Stop posting videos. The only way you can kind of get some sort of attention is if you're kind of perfect. And I'm not excusing this. I'm just saying this is the playing field that people are up against. That's in the music world. In people, especially, young girls and things like that, as far as how, their face and filters and stuff. Men, their body composition, things like that, status, career, what they see in the image, the relationships, how they depict their relationships, that they're just these couples that never fight, and all that stuff. It's like this is on all the way up to like about age 35. You've got all these people who are bombarded with perfection, and it's like, oh my, and you mentioned virtue signaling. It's like, I don't want to be one of these like people that's negligent or oh, I guess I'm not that good because I look at my marriage, and my marriage is we fight, and what's unfortunately happening is like my message to the world would be like, yeah, welcome to the club. My grandfather, he's passed away now, but he said something to me that just just let years of weight off of my head. I had been a fool. I had done some stupid things when I was in my early 20s. I'd sent him emails asking for stupid things. I'm too embarrassed to even say what it was. But I kind of went through this phase where I didn't talk to him for like 3 years. And then finally I called him. And I just leveled with him. I said, listen, man, I just felt really stupid. I called you. I emailed you stuff. I'd asked for money, things like that. I was like, the reason why this and that, whatever. And I just told him, I said, listen, I'm really sorry that I treated you like that I thought that I had the gall to reach out to you like this. And he listens to me for like probably 20 minutes of me just like, listen, this, and I'm sorry about that. And I don't know what I was thinking, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, well, welcome to the club. And it just brought all the weight down. It was just like one of the most wonderful things someone's ever said to me, of just like letting me off the hook, of all that stuff. And but it was just a real great moment that it was like,
I can totally see him saying that.
Yeah. And it was, and it was like, thanks, man. I really but to me, it was just like, I had gotten the opposite extreme. It was like I was just so into my offenses of people that I've done, the things that I've done to people. It's just like, bro, welcome. You're not something special because you're apologizing for being kind of like how a lot of people can be when they are in this dire situations when they're 20 years old. It's just, you did some stupid stuff. Get over it. Move on. Like it's, I almost had glorified it to a point in my own mind where like, yeah, I'm really going to do this. And I'm not playing down what I did. I think I did a good thing of owning that to him and having the guts to do that. But at the same time, it was like, man, I really it changed how I just brought everything down. And it's because I think a lot of people can get, especially this day and age, can get, bombarded with this. No, you have to be here, and if you're not getting up at 4 a.m. to go work out for 3 hours and stuff like that, and it's like, so people, they do fall prey to it, and it's like that is something now that there's kind of this pendulum swing backwards now. I think it's like I'm starting to see of like modern people that are mocking it. They're mocking their virtue signaling. They're mocking the people who are so strongly opinionated of like, oh, you got to be this high. Oh, well, unless you're this, and come on, rise and grind. It's 2 a.m. and stuff like that. The people that are mocking this now. And so I kind of see this kind of trend of younger people that are kind of like pushing against that. So it goes like this, right? But I do see a lot of people that it's like, so now when they get to the workplace, when I'm not making a difference. Well, there must be something wrong. They immediately get defensive. There must be something wrong with my boss is a crappy leader. I'm not excusing all of the issues of entitlement and issues of, of I deserve better and all. I understand that's real and present. But just like when you've got this constantly, there's always constantly everywhere you go, everywhere you open your phone, a light shining at how much you suck. That it's like, you got to find somewhere to defend. No, you're not wrong. You don't have any right to tell me this. You're making me feel bad for, where sometimes that may be coming from is just genuinely people who are so sick and tired of being bombarded with, you better be getting the best out of the world. You better be this, you better be that. And they're not things that are reputable. They're not things that are valuable. They're just, they're just meaningless endeavors of, being in shape and stuff like that.
But that really is the key, though, isn't it? And I have to follow this up with a question, because you made a statement, I think, that sums up what you're saying, is that kids are bombarded with this on a regular basis. So really, we're talking about a demographic. So when we use the word general, you brought it more specific, which I think is appropriate, is that the demographic is the younger age people who are really, let's be honest, they're still trying to figure who they are out. They're still trying to figure this whole life thing out. Exactly, right. So the question, though, is, because you made this statement, you said they are this is the game that they're growing up, or the playing field that kids are growing up in.
Kind of the hand they've been dealt.
Right, but you use the word playing field, and I think that's an interesting thing to stick with for this question specifically. Is are they playing the right game? Like, are they growing up learning to play the right game? And I use playing really loosely, but are they on the right field? You know what I mean? Because was man supposed to be, were we made to seek attention for ourselves?
No, see, like, that's the point, right?
Exactly.
That's the trap.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, okay, I guess I better get on the hamster wheel and start running as fast as I can to catch up with everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're going nowhere. Like, it's a hamster. So like that's actually, in a lot of ways, that's actually the hope. It's like, this isn't the race, man.
Exactly.
Like, at the end of the day, like, I don't forget his name. I was talking to him about it. There's some CEO out there. He's kind of an interesting character, but he's like really into this immortality thing, and he's a doctor every single day and stuff. I don't remember his name.
Yes, I know who you're talking about.
But it's like, dude, like, great. So you're going to be really healthy when you die. Like, fantastic. Hey, look, man, I would love for you to succeed in this, but I know better that this is an inevitable thing. You can't defeat death. You're going to face death. It's appointed for a man who wants to die. It's that simple. So with that being the case, I'm not hating on or saying that being healthy into your older age is a bad idea, but it's a hamster wheel of like desperately, no, I better. Kind of like I do think for older ages, like the boomer ages and stuff like that, it was all about retirement. You got to save for retirement. You got to be ready for retirement. Right, you want to make sure you got that nest egg, or whatever, right? That was the thing. Now that's kind of sort of become unpopular. Now it's like live fast, die young, whatever. Go start a business, go do crazy things, live. Is like the thing. But now what's living? To your point, right? Is that the race? What does that actually mean? Well, that means go do crazy things and accomplish big things. What? Build a company. Compete in sports, play music, be famous. Like, what does that mean? All of these things are still, Solomon says it's all vanity. At the end of the day, none of these things have, any eternal value. And so they're all just little hamster wheels. It's just another different hamster wheel to jump onto. And so to your point of attention seeking and this theme of dealing with people who are, what is attention seeking and is it bad, and rage baiting and people trying to drive people's attention. It's because they believe, maybe they believe that's the only way their life is going to matter, is if people know who they are. They'll date, they'll court attention at all costs.
Yeah. And honestly, it almost sounds like a very sad life to live, though. And that's kind of like, cause that's like the scripture. I was thinking about a story. The story of the prodigal son. You're familiar with it, but there's a story in the book of Luke, and it's Jesus. It's a parable. He's using a parable, but Jesus is talking about this kid who is raised in a wealthy house, and he tells his dad, "Hey, listen, I want my inheritance. Shovel me off what's mine." And he goes off and he wastes it just doing whatever the heck he wants. And then he has this, a moment where he comes to himself and he's like, he spent all his money. He's now living in famine and he's eating pig food and he's sleeping with the pigs and stuff like that. So just real rock bottom moment. And then he repents. The Bible says he comes to himself, comes to his father and says, I'm not worthy to be called your son. Just make me like one of your hired servants. let me work for a living. You know what I mean? And so the father does this, this incredible restoration. He hooks him up with, the ring and kills the fatted calf, celebrates that he's come back. But then it almost gives us this. It almost feels like a backstory, like a side note. But almost when you think about the whole scripture, it's almost like the scripture was given, or the parable was given, to talk more about the older brother than this younger brother. The younger brother wasted his life. Wasted all his money, comes back and is just simply restored to being a son, honored, right? Restored. But then you have this older brother who sees this happening and gets vexed. Mm-hmm. And he's all sorrowful and somber. And his dad says, what the heck's going on? And he goes, your brother's returned. Come celebrate for it with us. And he's like, how come, I've been here, I've been faithful, I've been loyal. And I haven't done what he did. He was an idiot, and I didn't do that. And you've never killed a fatted calf for me, and you've never let me make merry with my friends. And all of a sudden, it's like all this attention that was being given to his younger brother, who's restored, is like taken away from him. Like he feels like this has been pulled away from him.
He's been robbed.
He's been robbed of attention. Yeah. Like this is it's supposed to be my attention.
Yeah.
And Jesus doesn't he doesn't say this like it's a positive thing for him. He's saying, we're celebrating because this one who was dead is now alive again, and it shows really the focus of the Father. Jesus is not about self-attention. He's about restoration. He's about the plan of the Father. And so he gives you like this way of thinking. As a matter of fact, the scripture I read, woe to you who if all men speak well of you, he follows that up with this like list of commandments. Love your enemy. I can't remember the full context now. I almost want to go back to it, but he basically starts talking about a way to live that is very anti-us. It's very love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Mm. That doesn't get good attention. It's like, well, they hate me. I don't want to. No, they're not giving me what I want. And he says, bless those who curse you. Right now we're talking about actually supporting people, and blessing people is to the word blessed actually has an interesting part of its definition is to be envied by all. And so he's actually saying support that idea, like put the attention on them, draw people's attention to them. And be a blessing to them. And one slaps you on the cheek, turn in the other cheek. He's saying things that are so anti-self. But again, he's talking about this from the standpoint of how God sees life. Mm. This is how life is supposed to work, how we were meant to be, right? But we don't do that because none of that supports our own attention or our own, elevation in life. Yeah. It really does put us at a low point. But Jesus did that. And again, the Bible specifically says that God elevated his name above every other name. And all because he deferred attention to the Father constantly and about people. He was constantly about people. And Jesus' statement that anybody who hears these words of mine and follows after him will be my disciple. He'll know the truth, and the truth will make him free. Mm-hmm. So how do we work that into the logic, or the not the logic, but the environment that people our age and younger are being raised into? How do you fit that into that?
Well, I think I can only speak from just my personal experience, I think, just from this. And, obviously the Bible has direction on this, but ultimately it's almost a divorcing from self. So what does that look like? Is that I think, and my problem that I had for most of my young adult life, my dad shared the story a lot. I think he's even shared it in this podcast of when I was a kid. I wanted to be a teenager. When I was a teenager, I wanted to be adult. It was like I was always wanting to be the next thing in my life, of this kind of like, life ladder sorts. I want to be here, and I always, even throughout my 20s, I always had a high respect for people who were successful when they were young, and I would, ask to have lunch with them and ask them questions and things like that. And it wasn't fraudulent. It wasn't fake. It was just more like, I want to be something more than what I am. I think if you can stop romanticizing what you think you are and just come to grips with it not from a, okay, fine, I'm a loser worm. It's, you know what? I'm not, like, for me, I would love to be the CEO of some big company, right? From the standpoint of like be able to do something like that, to be able to run a company, be able to have that kind of leadership, be able to be a visionary, to take risks, to be able to do things like that, and still do all the things that God's called me to do, and be all these great hero kind of things, and be the guy that's making things work. But just coming to reality, it's funny because I was, I've recently had to deal with this in my life. It's like, man, this is what I want to pursue. I want to be this. But it was having to come to terms first with realizing it's not that I'm this in refinement. I'm not, I'm already that, but it's, I just need some work, it's like, dude, that's way above my caliber. Yeah. I would have a lot to, if I were put into a role of a CEO of a company, I would plummet it, based on what I know now. I don't have the expertise to do it. Or at the very best I could do is get a bunch of smart people in the room, go, oh my God, please help me guys to run this company. I don't know what I'm doing. What do you advise? What am I looking at? Calling, will you be my friend so you can tell me how to run this company? Yeah, I'm sure that would probably be the best I could do. Right? And so stop romanticizing this. And on a more relevant situation is my life. I always romanticize that I'm actually this. I create this identity for myself, and it's like, oh, well, I don't want to sacrifice this in order to be a follower of Christ. But this doesn't exist. When you're, and I think people do that. They romanticize their lives or who they are, and they sort of bolster up this image of themselves. And they think, well, man, I don't know if I can give this up. And there may be some humility there, like, oh, well, I know that I'm not this great person. Oh, come on, Elliot. No one actually believes they could be a CEO of a company. Sure, fine. But what they do is they bolster up like what they could be without Christ. So, for example, I know guys that are like, man, I don't know, man, if I can give up the girls. Like, dude, you're not a player, man. No one's like hunting you down, trying to like sleep with you, man. Like, or I don't know, man. I don't know the opportunities, man. I want to go out and make money. It's like, dude, you work a lot of hours in a low-paying job. You're not, you're not sacrificing. It's they romanticize this. It's like putting things back where they in their proper perspective. Is this really what you're putting above the opportunity to be a part of the mission of eternity? Like, is that really something? Put it in its proper perspective. Stop romanticizing like what it really is, and look at it. That makes it a lot easier when you're giving up something that is when you say I'm laying my life down. Look at what your life is. The disciples that followed Jesus, they were fishermen, they were tax collectors, they were they weren't these great men, they weren't these kings, they weren't these generals of armies, things like that. They were just these simple guys, and they forsook all. I appreciate what they're saying, but we've forsaken all to follow you. What did Peter do when Jesus was crucified? I'm going fishing. Like he went and took a work. Like it would be like me saying, well, I guess I'm going to the office. It's not like, these kinds of things that people are romanticized that, oh my gosh, you don't understand, by giving this up, I'm giving up the opportunity to be the next Elon Musk. Like, let's just be real. On your very best day, your chances of being the next Elon Musk are pretty low. Mm-hmm. Like, just be honest with yourself that this is probably not going to happen. People who strike these kinds of levels of position of public knowledge, I guess, or fame, or whatever. Right? Sure, I understand that there's character there. There's things that they do that they're driven. They're really good at a certain thing, right? They're influential or whatever. Fine, but you're not giving up being the next Elam. So stop that. Put things in their proper perspective, and that will help you become a learner. That will help you stop trying to drive your own life, trying to figure out things, and because you're just driving blind. You're just going to hit walls, and you're going to, I'm going to do my things my own way, and then you'll be like me. You'll spend your 20s hitting walls. No. I know what I'm doing. You need to tell me what to do. I'm fine. Not liking it when people are taking attention away from me because it's like, oh, don't you see how awesome I am? I'm such a great guitar player. Don't you understand what a blessing I am to the world around me? But with my awesome guitar playing, whatever it is, or my leader, what I think are my great leadership skills, or all of what you can insert, whatever your thing is, right in there of how this is how I'm valuable, and just stop saying that and start saying, you know what? Honestly, without Christ, I really don't have much to offer here. The world can live without me, right? So I think that's a big step one. But I don't think most people can really get past that. They get really married to what makes them valuable, like because they're like I was talking about before. They're on that hamster wheel of no. I've got to be valuable. See, if you're telling me I'm not valuable, then I'm going for another venture in life. And so unfortunately, they choose an easier, lower path, which lasts. What Paul says is a vapor. This life is but a vapor. We're here one day and gone the next. So then you just get on the train of people that will never be seen again, right? And even if you do something great in this world, it's like, yeah, cool, whatever. You conquered the whole world. No one really cares about Alexander the Great. No one really cares about, when's the last time you walked into a young boy's room and saw posters of Alexander the Great, or something like that? It's just, insert whatever name you want to put in there. It's just, these things don't have eternal value. So put that away. Stop chasing your own. My dad says it well. It's an old saying he's got. Don't believe your own press clippings, I think is the way it's worded. That was really helpful to me. It's like, if I can stop doing this, all of a sudden now I'm on this road that's catapulting me with all the knowledge of other people. And if I'm functioning here, it's because I've been given the blessing of knowledge of other people that are going to help me make better decisions that'll actually save me from a lot of trouble and bad decisions and bad consequences. And so the question you originally asked was, how do we bring this to people that are in our generation that may be teeter-tottering with the idea of becoming Christians or wondering how this works? Start there, man. And that, we always advise people, start reading your Bible, and we start with the book of John and things. The reason for this is because this shows you who Jesus is. Start from the basics of this. Stop bringing in your own ideas. Don't, if you do that, it's not going to work. I'll stop there, man, I said a lot, so it's kind of a huge step one. It's probably could be broken down into multiple steps, I think.
So it's interesting because you kind of hinted at this, but you didn't say it directly. And you were definitely touching on this in your context, but like the idea of having an opportunity to actually not be the one in charge of making your life something is kind of relieving, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And you said it with the disciples, which is real. I mean, I can actually relate to the disciples. Yeah. I didn't come from something great.
Yeah.
And then God started making me something better. Mm-hmm. Like, I was nobody anyway. Yeah. So any good I've experienced in my life has been because of not just a time or a moment, but moments when I had to God, I personally don't know what to do here. And so I'm just going to again, surrender my life to your hands and find out what you want me to do. Yeah. Because ultimately it's hard to, we do this juggle thing. I do this juggle thing where I'm I'm doing well in the sense that I can really see that God's really doing something in my life. I think things are happening and things are moving and I'm, opportunities are opening up and clearly they're God. They're not, I didn't make them happen. Stuff is falling in my lap and they're opportunities, that I never would have thought I would be given when I was just, starting out as an apprentice electrician. We're talking about just monetary, life and money and positions and jobs and stuff like that. And then also opportunities in church ministry and, being able to preach and stuff like that. I although there were desires there, I would love that to happen, But it wasn't until I just said, God, I've clearly messed up my life trying to do it on my own. So I'm just gonna like put my life in your hands, literally, and just pray, seek counsel from my pastor and read the Bible and try to find out from where I am right now, what would God want me to do?
Yeah.
Like, what's the next step in, fill in the blank, this part of my life, whether it's finances or marriage or, raising kids, ministry and preaching and working with people to be converted to Christianity and like all those different dynamics that really did just describe like my whole life. That's the full context of my life right there. And there have been moments where I see things happening not fast enough.
Yeah.
And so I pull back on that and I start trying to make things happen on my own.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden stuff just starts kind of crumbling. Going back to that same simple, lowly electrician that I was before. And it's like, all right, let's try this again. But my point in saying that is that the disciples, like you said, they didn't come from riches and wealth. I think the only person you could really argue, like two people you could really argue came from that were maybe Levi and Matthew, because they were tax collectors. But they were like tax collectors. Jewish tax collectors were thieves.
Yeah.
And so these dudes were making money hand over fist because they were ripping people off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're not talking about a high level life here. We're just talking about a rich life.
Yeah.
But they weren't people of status. They were rejected. They were very, very lonely. Their lifestyle. I've done a ton of research on them culturally, and they were not liked people.
Yeah.
And they didn't even really have their own people. The Jews rejected them, and they weren't Romans.
Yeah.
And so they were literally their own isolated version of people.
Yeah.
And everybody hated them. And so it's like you can't look at any one of the disciples and say, they had it going on, man. And then Jesus made them something more. Maybe Paul to a certain extent, but even he was like a Pharisee. He started killing
Depends
Christians.
on who you're looking at,
Right.
what lens you're looking
Yeah,
at.
yeah. No, I'm just saying as far as like position in life, you know what I mean?
It seems to me that he was part of the group that Jesus disliked the most.
Yes, a Pharisee, right? Yeah, I know, huh?
I
But
think dislike is a
I'm
wrong
just
word,
talking
but
about
yeah.
okay, like somebody that lowered themselves. I don't know how else to look at it. He didn't see it that way. God elevated his life. I am that I am. Like I was just talking about before the podcast, because of the grace of God. But again, here's a guy who he's the story goes, he knocked off his horse. He hears Jesus speak, and Jesus confronts him. You're kicking against the goads. You're persecuting my people. And his next question is like, what would you have me do?
Yeah.
Talk about like surrender. Like, what do you want me to do? And then God takes his life and makes him one of the most influential people that's ever lived. Period.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot argue against that. You do your research on history. I have researched and read about Alexander the Great in great depth. Mm-hmm. The dude was jacked up, like really, really messed up.
Yeah.
But he did great things. He conquered Alexander the Great, right? But Paul was influential across cultures, different countries, different people, different levels of people, different demographics. And he was incredibly influential. And for the purpose of giving himself to God and saying, God, what do you want me to do next?
Yeah.
And it really is what the disciples did. They left all. They didn't leave a ton.
Yeah.
But they still left all. And God elevated their life. And now, the statements made about them here, those who have turned the world upside down have come here also.
Yeah.
When they see these people coming and they're like, really? World impact? World impact.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, talk about good attention. I mean, they're getting persecuted and beaten, stoned and hung and crucified and stuff, but
attention, sure.
they got some good attention. Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, my point is like, taking your life out of that playing field. I'm no longer going to seek my attention. God, what do you want me to do? Yeah. That really is a big difference maker.
Yeah, and it's a decision that has to be remade again and again and again.
Exactly.
Because it's, and it's, so something I really enjoy doing in my life from time to time is I love talking and asking questions from my dad's older friends. We recently had a men's discipleship class, and it was Pastor Paul Stevens that was preaching, and I got the chance to actually sit next to him, and we went out to eat, and I started to ask him questions. And seeing, because one of the things I really enjoy is, my dad kind of becomes our peer for a second, and he's like one of the kids in the room. And next, and then he starts acting, starts saying silly things. But the reason why he's able to do
right
that,
now, man.
Yeah, I know. But the reason why he's able to do that is because the extensive relationship that he has with these men that had a huge influence in his life. They were there for my dad when my dad, and he's told stories about this. There's another one, Mark Crumpler, who's like, arguably one of my dad's best friends, and it's talking to these guys, and it's interesting because as my dad will share things about his life and how he learned things, I've actually come to notice that he actually doesn't have a lot of quotes from necessarily his pastor, Pastor Warner, but from his peers. Mm-hmm. And when you're able to, and you could, are these guys his peers? They were a little bit further ahead than him in some ways. I think Mark and him were about the same to a certain degree. But one of the things that I see is like, my dad will have a conversation with a friend. A friend will say some things that will be some timely words, and then he'll, have kind of gotten the victory over something, there's been a number of times when my dad's done that, and I really respect the fact that these men were there, to be able to give that to him. I think when you're able to stop romanticizing what you think you are and you see where you're at and you look to your peers like, hey, I'm kind of struggling this. What do you think about this? Obviously a pastor is able to bring some wise counsel, but something about a peer, they really do know you, right? And I think I'm one of the only, one of the most forgotten thing about being a pastor's kid is because he's also my father. He's also really know what I am and what I'm really thinking and how he can see through the facade. But like peers do that. Friends can do that. Like, oh, quit it. You're full of crap, dude. Oh, come on, man. You were ego tripping when you were doing X, Y, Z. They know you because they know how you act. They know how you joke because you're yourself around them. So when you reach out to a peer and you're like, hey, I'm thinking this way, there's something really good about this. So that can only happen when you've done this. And so if you want to make it for Jesus and you want to live the life that is contrary, it goes against the grain. It's foolishness because the Bible says this. It's the things that we are. It's foolishness to the world. It's that we do. So why would you choose a lesser life? Why would you choose to do things that are going to rub people the wrong way? That's we do compare certain things about building a church to a business in a lot of ways, but a lot of them don't work because not that they don't work, but there's a lot of things that are not applicable because as a business you start making stands against things. Now you're making political statements or things like that. You're going to rub certain customers the wrong way and they're not going to want to shop at your store. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, are you in business to make a statement or are you in business to make a profit? If you're in business to make a statement, you won't be in business very much longer, right? So there's certain things that businesses have to do. Unfortunately, the church doesn't have that luxury. So in essence, making things that they may detract attention. This podcast is a good example. Is we don't have hundreds of thousands of viewers, and we never will, because the things that we talk about here, or I should say you guys, you and my dad, the things that you guys advocate and the things that are being spoken over this are not going to resonate with most people. They're going to look at this and go, that's stupid. I'm not going to listen to this. And they will turn off and they will go get back on the same hamster wheel or a different hamster wheel, pursuing the same meaningless things in life, looking to please themselves and find something that works for them. It's like, and the problem is that end is destruction. There's a way that seems right to a man, but the end is destruction. And unfortunately, that's this way is not going to this way is not going to lend itself to personal success. It may call on you to lay your life down, but if you've already come to terms with the fact that laying your life down, it's like, what did I have anyway? Jesus, Peter does say something, to Jesus that when the 5,000 turn away from him, he says, "You have where else will we go? You have the words of eternal life." That is, if we can say that, you can be, you could be, hopefully this never happens to anybody we know, or listens to this. You could be crucified upside down and still make it all the way through the end. But one of the greatest things is, despite all of Peter's mistakes and all of his errors that we read about in the Bible, there's no going to be denying the fact that he's going to be pretty widely renowned in heaven. We're going to see it's like, dang, that's Peter, dude. That's crazy. Like that's freaking Peter. Yeah. What a dude, Yeah. And Peter walked on the water. Peter, this, he's the first one recorded to have spoken up and preached after being filled with the Holy. Like what a claim to fame. Like you were the first guy to preach. First guy to get the mic, so to speak, in the Bible. From after having been endowed with the Holy Spirit. Like these are things that that worldly people they'll never gravitate to. They won't catch their attention. It
Yeah.
won't be there. It won't be attractive. But in eternity, it will be renowned for all of eternity. That's something that's like, these are going to be echoes of eternity, that millions of earth years will go by and we will still recant the stories of things that happened. And once we learn of the stories of those others that have done similar things and done similar feats for God, that they chose a better resurrection rather than popularity in this life or getting attention in this life, by means of rage baiting or virtue signaling or all the things that you're describing, but done it the hard way, which may not gain many followers, that will be worthwhile. That'll
Yeah.
be much more worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll stop there. It's 8:05. I appreciate you joining, Elliot. I don't always have a really clear idea of like what to do when your dad's not here, but I appreciate you volunteering and making this a lot more fun.
Oh, sure.
I actually hate being here by myself. So I've done a couple by myself, and it's like, if I'm inspired, it's cool, but sometimes I'm just like, oh man, it's like a lonely podcast. I'd much rather have a conversation with someone. It's a lot of fun.
Glad I was able to fill a gap in your life, Jordan.
I am fulfilled. Well, anyway, thanks for joining. If you're watching live, we really do appreciate you joining and staying tuned. If you're watching after the fact, again, as we always do, we appreciate you guys joining. If you guys have questions, comments, anything that comes in, after the fact, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And we'll be here again next week. We hope you can join.